The European campaign is over. The French army collapsed in weeks. Polish divisions have been shattered and scattered. The Wehrmacht is pushing east. Motorized corps are on a relentless, forced march. Dust hangs in massive gray pillars over the battered dirt roads. Elite German units expect no real resistance. They know their own crushing power all too well. They have total faith in the absolute perfection of their war machine. This machine does not miss. This machine grinds European cities into fine rubble. This flawless machine slams full tilt into a lone Soviet tank. Impact. The shriek of rending metal. A massive explosion jolts the sweltering air. A KV-1 heavy tank is making its final stand. Weight, 45 tons. Frontal armor, 75 millimeters. A 76mm rifled gun. A steel behemoth of engineering forged by the brutal Soviet school of tank design specifically for the Great War. The crew makes a conscious, cold-blooded choice. The commander gives the only logical order. He is a cold professional. He knows exactly what it means to hold the line. A heavy, armor-piercing shell clangs into the breach. Fire! The violent recoil slams the breech back. The ring of the spent casing hitting the floor grates on frayed nerves. The enemy column grinds to a dead halt. 11 German tanks are instantly transformed into roaring gasoline torches. 6 heavy armored vehicles are ripped to shreds by direct AP hits. 57 enemy soldiers are laid low in the road dust. Human blood quickly mixes with thick motor oil. The enemy refuses to believe their eyes. They scramble to call in heavy field artillery for support. The Soviet tank shrugs off the return fire. Deep, jagged gouges mar the thick cast armor. AP slugs whistle as they scream into the sky. The air inside the cramped fighting compartment heats to the breaking point. The crew chokes on the buildup of toxic propellant fumes. They do their hard, dirty job to the bitter end. The battle is over. Thick black smoke crawls over the wrecked river crossing. A ringing silence weighs heavy on ruptured eardrums. A German colonel walks silently up to the smoking hulk of the riddled tank. He stares long and hard at the gaping exit wounds in the steel. With a professional eye, he gauges the thickness of the unpenetrated frontal armor. He realizes with crystal clarity the tactical price of those lost hours of the offensive. A short, sharp, guttural command rings out. Wehrmacht officers snap into a straight line. They snap their right hands up in unison. The enemy officially salutes the dead Soviet tankers under the distant, rhythmic thud of the cannonade. The shaken enemy inters the doomed crew with full military honors. Then comes absolute silence. 17 long years of stony silence. 17 years of total, hollow oblivion instead of well-earned military glory. The front line rolls rapidly back to the east. The retreat quickly devolves into uncontrolled, bloody chaos. Divisional communications collapse completely. Field HQs are swallowed in tactical encirclements. Classified staff documents burn bright in iron footlockers. Panicked clerks ditch official personnel rosters on the roadsides. The bloody millstones of the retreat grind the names of the crossing's defenders into nothing. The massive, lumbering state machine loses all record of them forever. The bureaucracy churns on, governed by its own ruthless, ironclad internal laws. No stamped document, no proven heroism. Thick cardboard folders are filed away in deep, dark basement archives. The paper tomb slams shut. This invisible paper grave holds a man tighter than a reinforced concrete bunker. The cold, deep rear allows for zero procedural exceptions. The motherland indifferently dispatches standard printed death notices. Dry official forms drop into empty mailboxes. No details of the final engagement. No precise coordinates for the burial site. The bureaucratic phrase, "missing in action," hits waiting families harder than a sniper's bullet. The vast country loses even the pre-war personal photos of its fallen defenders. Young faces fade from glossy photo paper. Names are scrubbed forever from fragmented regimental lists. Nothing remains but the ringing, icy void of non-existence. The tank commander knew his trade. He had mastered the lethal geometry of the ambush. He coldly calculated the optimal fire sectors for his gun. He watched as elite German war machines burst into flames in his crosshairs. He did his dirty, grueling work without a shred of wasted emotion. Those endless seconds of peak tension stayed there, in that scorching steel box by an unnamed river. In the deep, peaceful rear, those seconds mean absolutely nothing. Rear echelon archivists methodically bind thin files with coarse, white thread. Bureaucratic formality is a guaranteed killer of living human memory. The lack of a small portrait photo in a personnel file permanently robs the fallen commander of the title of Hero of the Soviet Union. A dry job description easily crosses out the blood spilled in that tank. Spacious offices exude an icy, procedural indifference. The flawless logic of the military chancellery completely erases the steel will of professionals. Time methodically and relentlessly finishes the job. The damp earth indifferently reclaims the foxholes. Torrential autumn rains wash away the deep-set ruts of wide tank treads. Salvage crews with cutting torches arrive with businesslike efficiency at the overgrown site of the horrific battle. The blowtorch hisses loudly, slicing the thick armor of the knocked-out KV-1 into transportable chunks. Twisted, scorched metal is loaded onto flatbed rail cars. The scrap steel goes into glowing industrial blast furnaces. Heavy agricultural crawler tractors roll out onto the level field. Steel plows crunch through soil packed hard by explosions. The former battlefield is plowed over, back and forth, until no trace remains. Thick, tall wheat hides the deep, jagged shell craters. A soldier's death is harvested as just another bumper crop. The local villagers gradually forget the dull, bone-shaking roar of the tank guns. There is no stone obelisk. The mass grave is hopelessly lost in the tall field grass. The bitter paradox of world history hits like a physical blow. The shaken, merciless enemy meticulously documents every detail of the brutal fight. An enemy staff officer pedantically makes detailed entries in his personal field diary. The adversary precisely and scrupulously records their own heavy losses in armor and manpower. The enemy genuinely respects the unyielding strength they witnessed. Their own vast country answers its dead heroes with nothing but cold, decades-long silence. The cynical state propaganda machine deftly molds convenient, glossy icons for posters. Fictional heroes from the rear are promptly awarded massive bronze monuments and colorful newspaper spreads. The real combat professionals vanish forever into absolute nothingness. Their genuine tactical success is buried under red tape in dark, dusty archives. Their voluntary execution of orders becomes a mere nameless statistical error in the tragic global retreat of 1941. The sheer hopelessness of this historical reality sets the teeth on edge. The crew gave their lives for the exhausted, retreating infantry at the wooden crossing. They kept their oath. They carried out their orders to the logical end. They were simply, neatly erased from the people's memory. This suffocating bureaucratic silence lasts for long decades. This dead silence rings louder in the ears than any artillery salvo. July 1941. The front is disintegrating. The Soviet defensive line has been torn to shreds. An elite German Panzer division is lunging forward. The steel steamroller methodically crushes pockets of resistance. Treads clank as they grind the remains of hastily dug trenches into the dry earth. Wehrmacht motorized units are moving at top march speed. Engines roar under the strain. Thick gray dust instantly chokes the air filters. The German vanguard ruthlessly burns through narrow breakthrough corridors. The collapse of the front hits like a sledgehammer. Divisional staff communications were cut 2 days ago. Phone lines have been severed by enemy saboteurs. The airwaves are packed with the endless crackle of German jammers. Centralized command is completely lost. Soviet infantry retreats in long, never-ending columns. Exhausted men trudge on foot. Faded tunics are soaked through with acrid sweat. Heavy rifles chafe raw shoulders until they bleed. From above, the heavy machine guns of dive bombers strike mercilessly. Enemy aircraft methodically gun down live targets with impunity. The shoulders of the dusty roads are littered with abandoned carts and the charred skeletons of army trucks. The lethal mathematics of the retreat function without a hitch. The march speed of a bone-tired infantryman, 5 kilometers per hour, max. The speed of a German medium tank on a hard road, 40 kilometers per hour. The enemy is closing in relentlessly. The enemy is breathing down their necks. Water glints dully ahead. The Dobrost River. A narrow, natural barrier breaks the escape route. The old wooden bridge deck groans under the weight of thousands of hobnailed boots. The crossing instantly becomes a perfect death trap. Scattered retreating units converge into a dense, lumbering mass. German forward scouts are already moving into direct visual range. Zeiss optics fixate hungrily on the gray-clad backs on the bridge. Tank guns are laid onto the stationary target. A cold-blooded slaughter is about to begin. Fast German machines will simply crush the exhausted men under their wide tracks. The infantry won't have time to dig in on the steep opposite bank. There is no anti-tank artillery left here. The last batteries were wiped out by ground attack aircraft early this morning. Armor-piercing shells are gone. The situation is turning absolutely critical. The impending catastrophe is measured in mere minutes. The retreating division desperately needs a shield. A massive, angular silhouette looms through the choking grey dust. A KV-1 heavy tank. 45 tons of cast Ural steel. The powerful diesel engine howls under the strain of high RPMs. The driver maintains a white-knuckled grip on the stiff steering levers. The tank brings up the rear of the screening column. A heavy, dead-serious order is given. The infantry division commander doesn't waste precious time on long tactical explanations. Set up an ambush, block the bridge, hold for the column. Wilco, holding. The tank commander's voice is bone dry. The radio crackles and goes dead for good. No pointless discussion. No lofty words about heroically saving comrades. Order received. Mission clear. There is no chance of surviving this fight. The tank sharply breaks its path. The left tread locks hard as the clutch engages. The right one churns the dry earth with power. The multi-ton armored beast pivots heavily in place. The KV-1 slowly disappears into the tall, golden rye. The silent ambush at the wooden bridge over the Dobrost River is set. Camouflaging the heavy machine takes only minutes. The massive diesel engine is cut. A sudden, ear-piercingly thick silence falls. Only the overheated metal of the hull ticks rhythmically as it cools. The crew works fast, in sync and in silence. The gunner habitually checks the stiff laying mechanisms. Optics clear. AP ready. The heavy breech block slams shut with a dry, metallic snap. 60 shells in the racks. 60 chances to stop the armored avalanche. The commander glues his eye to the panoramic sight. Ahead, an empty dirt road. Behind, exhausted infantry crossing the river. The tank becomes a stationary, camouflaged pillbox. Blocking the narrow approach to the bridge is a hard engineering solution to an impossible task. The machine is positioned perfectly. The armored hull is safely tucked behind a natural fold in the terrain. The cocked steel trigger of the massive caliber gun patiently awaits its target. Suddenly, the needle on the instrument panel plummets. Oil pressure fluctuates critically. An airlock hits the fuel system. The engine might never start again for an emergency repositioning. A tired mechanic's mistake? No. Just the ultimate wear and tear of old parts. The tank has logged hundreds of kilometers on dusty roads without proper maintenance. There is no range left. The crew is pinned to this spot for good. A tactical withdrawal is now a theoretical impossibility. The tankers are sealed inside a stationary steel box. The July sun mercilessly bakes the thick armor. Inside the cramped fighting compartment, the temperature skyrockets. The stale air reeks of grease, hot metal, and human sweat. The lethal math of the coming battle is set in stone. One gun against an entire mechanized division. Time coils into a tight spring. An anxious night falls. The clatter of enemy treads in the dark draws closer by the second. The setting sun glares off the dusty, armored glass. The last Red Army soldier trudges across the wooden bridge deck. The exhausted infantry vanishes across the river. The shattered division dissolves into the blue evening twilight. The massive tank is left completely alone. 45 tons of frozen Ural steel. The commander stares silently at the empty dirt road. He takes a deep, steady breath. The heavy turret hatch slams shut with a metallic clang. The heavy iron bolt slides home. The lock seals the exit for good. The crew makes their final, conscious choice. A voluntary step past the threshold of self-preservation. There is no way back. Their world instantly shrinks to the size of the cramped fighting compartment. The air becomes stifling. The thick smell of spent diesel fuel mixes permanently with the sharp scent of gun oil. Load AP! Up! The heavy 76mm shell slides into the bore with a ring. The massive breech block slams home, jarring the eardrums. The mechanism locks tight. Exactly 60 rounds remain in the side racks. 60 dull, gleaming brass casings. 60 heavy armor-piercing and high-explosive slugs. This is the strict mathematical limit of the coming slaughter. No resupply is coming. External comms are silent. The radio emits only the dull, steady hiss of static. A profound isolation weighs heavy on the tankers. They are completely cut off from the rest of the world. 4 men and 1 gun against an oncoming armored armada. Tall, golden rye presses against the steel hull. Thick, stiff stalks completely hide the fenders and massive road wheels. The camouflage works perfectly. The heavy tank settles deep into the dry summer earth. The massive machine blends perfectly into the landscape. The hidden steel behemoth becomes a hair trigger. Nature goes on as usual. Night insects chirp loudly in the evening cool. A light, warm breeze sways the grain. This serene scene contrasts sharply with the lethal contents of the fighting compartment. The men inside are silent. Conversation has lost all meaning. Each man knows his job. Each man knows the inevitable end waiting in the morning. The crew, businesslike, checks the internal systems. No panic, no shaking hands. Only trained muscle memory remains. The gunner's hands habitually find the elevation and traverse wheels. The stiff gears grind quietly. The turret traverses smoothly a few degrees. The gun settles into the perfect fire sector. The wooden river bridge is locked firmly in the crosshairs of the optic. The lenses have been meticulously wiped with a clean rag. The sight picture is crystal clear. Darkness rapidly blankets the prepared position. The night before battle wrings the human nervous system dry. Tension physically thickens the stagnant air inside the tank. Every minute of waiting stretches into a long, agonizing year. The sudden snap of dry branches rudely breaks the night silence. The risk of accidental discovery skyrockets. The commander presses his face to the vision block. 100 meters from the ambush, 2 enemy motorcycles roll slowly by. Their 2-stroke engines sputter deafeningly. A German forward reconnaissance patrol. A bright headlight beam sweeps right along the edge of the rye field. The light picks out individual stalks from the thick darkness. Machine gun ready. Ready. The bow gunner's fingers rest on the trigger. The heavy drum is loaded. The safety is clicked off silently. One short squeeze, and the motorcyclists would be face down in the road dust. A shot would inevitably blow their position before the main force arrived. The price of a moment's weakness. Total mission failure. The commander makes the only right, hard call. Hold fire. Let them pass. The blinding headlight beam passes a meter from the camouflaged turret. The German soldiers talk loudly and carelessly. Their confident foreign speech grates on tense ears. The motorcycles pass by. They disappear around a sharp bend in the dusty road. The silent ambush remains undetected. The tank continues to stand silent in the tall grain. The immediate threat has passed. Thick, cold sweat stings the tanker's eyes. Their ragged breathing slowly levels out. Time resumes its slow, grueling crawl. The short summer night stretches on forever. The clatter of foreign tracks begins far beyond the horizon. At first, it's just a faint vibration in the hard ground. The earth transmits a fine, continuous tremor to the wide steel tracks of the Soviet machine. Then the distant sound thickens. The low, guttural roar of dozens of powerful engines gradually fills the air. The elite tank armada relentlessly approaches the narrow river crossing. There is no mistaking that sound. That is the sound of oncoming mechanized death. The tankers listen to the heavy roar with an icy, absolute composure. They sit motionless at their stations. The commander methodically, blindly checks the spare machine gun drums. The gunner dry runs the heavy turret traverse mechanisms one more time. The driver simply rests his calloused hands on the now useless, stiff steering levers. The engine is hopelessly dead. The massive machine isn't going anywhere. It will fight its last battle right here. Gray pre-dawn mist rises from the cold river. A damp, biting chill seeps through the narrow vision slits. The final morning of their lives arrives. The crew meets it in total, icy silence. No one writes hurried farewell letters home. There is no physical time for sentiment. It is grim, routine, man's work. A rigorous check of the pressure in the recoil cylinders, a careful inspection of the shell racks, strict verification of the electrical triggers. Every minor technical detail is checked with manic precision. The slightest mechanical failure in the coming fight will cost them their lives. The smallest malfunction will rob them of the chance to take as many of the enemy with them as possible. They already gave their lives last night when they sealed the hatches. All that remains is to extract the highest possible blood price from the enemy. Air's good. Optics clear. Dry reports. Short, clipped phrases hit like gunshots. Internal tension reaches the absolute breaking point. The clatter of German tanks is now crystal clear. The metallic clanking quickly merges into a single, monotonous roar of steel machines. The lead march element approaches the designated line. The enemy confidently rolls into direct fire range. The commander glues himself to the rubber eyepiece of the panoramic sight. His right hand rests firmly on the gun trigger. His heart rate slows to a crawl. His breathing stops completely. The silence before the coming storm becomes absolutely deafening. The carefree morning of July 17th is shattered. The dawn mist over the Dobrost River begins to thin. The July sun quickly warms the cold armor. The optic catches steady movement. An elite German column rolls brazenly onto the dirt road. The range is closing fast. The enemy is absolutely certain of their own invincibility. The hatches of the war machines are wide open. Wehrmacht tankers sit carelessly on the armor. They talk loudly. They smoke, anticipating an easy, victorious march. The lead medium tank rolls boldly onto the narrow wooden deck of the river crossing. The old, thick planks groan under the weight of 20 tons of steel. The enemy driver doesn't cut his cruising speed. A brazen, blind march toward his own death. Inside the Soviet tank, the tomb-like cold of perfect engineering calculation reigns. The commander is glued to the rubber eyepiece of his periscope. His finger rests hard on the stiff trigger mechanism. Range, 600 meters. 500. 400. Every meter gained presses hard against strained eardrums. The gunner breathes heavily and hoarsely. Thick, salty sweat stings his bloodshot eyes. Fire? Wait. The commander holds a lethal, icy pause. This is the ultimate lethal math of the tank ambush. Strike too early, and the column will have time to throw it into emergency reverse. Strike too late, and the enemy will punch through across the river. The lead target must reach the exact center of the flimsy wooden bridge. The crosshairs of the optic are locked onto the gray flank of the German machine. The pause burns up the remaining oxygen in the cramped fighting compartment. The stagnant air becomes tangibly thick. His heart hammers against his ribs. The enemy tank reaches the calculated dead point. Perfect firing position. The trap is sprung. AP, fire! The firing pedal slams into the steel floor with a heavy thud. A deafening roar shatters the cramped interior. The massive recoil of the heavy gun jolts 45 tons of Ural steel. An empty brass casing clatters onto the ribbed floorboards. Acrid propellant smoke instantly chokes the tight turret. The armor-piercing shell traverses the distance in mere fractions of a second, its solid core ripping through Krupp steel. Kinetic energy transforms instantly into searing heat. An explosion follows. The lead German tank is transformed into a roaring firebrand as its stowed ammunition detonates. The turret, sheared off by the blast, crashes heavily onto the wooden decking of the bridge. The crossing is now deadlocked by burning, twisted metal. The way forward is severed. A sharp turn of the heavy handwheel follows. The gunner frantically cranks the traverse mechanism, shifting the barrel toward the very tail of the stalled column. Load! Sudden silence. The breech block is jammed solid. The heavy shell is stuck halfway into the bore. where thick dust and heavy carbon fouling have seized the precision mechanism. Precious seconds slip away. The Germans are beginning to realize what is happening. Enemy turrets jerk fitfully, searching for the invisible source of the heavy fire. One more moment, and a dense return volley will tear their concealment apart. Use the pry bar! Do it! The loader slams the heavy metal rod against the brass base of the casing with all his might. Raw physical force breaks the stubborn resistance of the jammed mechanism. The shell seats into the chamber with a loud crunch. The steel breech block slams home with a sharp, metallic clack. The breech is locked. The gun is ready for action. The extreme tension breaks for a single split second. Ready. Fire! A second whip-crack shot shatters eardrums again. The shell strikes the trailing heavy armored car with absolute precision. Thin rolled armor shatters into jagged, lethal splinters. The fuel tank erupts, and the vehicle sags heavily on its shredded rubber tires. The kill zone is cinched into a tight, dead knot. In front, the tank burning fiercely on the bridge, behind, the blazing wreck of the armored car. On both sides of the narrow road, deep, treacherous, impassable marsh. The viscous mud physically prevents the heavy equipment from turning around. The enemy column is boxed into a narrow, earthen corridor. Total panic grips the Wehrmacht elite. Crews feverishly slam their steel hatches shut. Panzer grenadiers leap from the high armor into the roadside muck, screaming. The Soviet tank commander works with cold, methodical precision, dictating exact coordinates and prioritizing targets by threat level. Range 300, right 005, medium, fire. Another armor-piercing shell guts the gray armored flank. A third bonfire erupts on the dirt road. The tankers work like a single, well-oiled machine. The loader rhythmically heaves the heavy shells. The gunner surgically drives the crosshairs into the enemy vehicle's most vulnerable spots. The turret ring, the engine compartment, the thin side armor. Every direct hit sparks a shower of bright embers and the screech of tearing metal. The enemy is blind, paralyzed by the suddenness and sniper-like precision of the heavy blows. German tank guns fire wildly, their armor-piercing rounds tearing up the empty field far behind the concealed Soviet tank. The dry earth heaves under disorganized explosions. Inside the cramped fighting compartment, the temperature skyrockets. The exhaust fan fails to clear the thick, heavy smoke. The tankers cough hoarsely, grimy tears streaming down soot-covered faces. High explosive! On the infantry! Fire! The blast of a heavy HE shell sweeps away the soldiers hunkered down in the deep ditch. Bloody dust slowly settles on the mangled foreign armor. The grim mechanics of the ambush work flawlessly. The tactical calculation is paying off. The steel trap has ground down the German vanguard in mere minutes, yet the number of targets remains daunting. The stunned enemy is gradually recovering. Experienced German commanders begin to calculate the trajectory of the incoming rounds. The barrels of the enemy tanks turn in unison toward the tall, golden rye field. The thick camouflage no longer protects them. The ambush is finally compromised. Now begins a brutal, open confrontation of total annihilation. The heavy gun delivers another massive shot. The loader reaches for a new shell, but the meager ammo supply is dwindling relentlessly. Every movement costs the crew mounting effort. Hands are caked in black powder residue and bleeding abrasions from the heavy brass. The enclosed steel space is rapidly turning into a furnace. A storm of invisible fire sows bloody chaos. The road by the Dobrost River turns into a corridor of flame. The lead and trailing vehicles have deadlocked the narrow track, squeezing the German column between impassable marshes. Metal scrap burns with a deafening roar. Heavy turrets are ripped off by internal explosions, and multi-ton chunks of Krupp steel crash into the roadside mud. Acrid black smoke blankets the July sun like a shroud, turning day into deep twilight. Fire spreads greedily to the fuel tanks of neighboring vehicles. Detonation follows detonation. Burning diesel floods the old wooden decking of the bridge. Elite Wehrmacht soldiers scramble in panic amidst the bursting metal, falling under the lashing impact of shrapnel as they try to take cover behind the burning hulls of their own tanks. The motorized infantry is taking catastrophic losses. The bloody meat grinder is running at full throttle. Inside the concealed Soviet tank, it is pure, unadulterated hell. The cramped fighting compartment has shrunk to the size of a glowing kiln. The exhaust fan shrieks at maximum RPM, its motor overwhelmed by the toxic propellant gases. Suffocating white smoke stings the eyes. There is practically nothing left to breathe. The tankers gasp for searing air with parched mouths, their faces plastered with black sweat and corrosive machine oil. The crew works at an inhuman pace, their exhaustion blocked by a massive surge of adrenaline. Living men have transformed into precision steel mechanisms. Every movement is calibrated to the millimeter. Muscle memory dictates the order. Step. Grip the 16-kilogram brass casing. A sharp thrust forward. Armor piercing. Ready. The heavy steel wedge of the breech clacks with merciless regularity. The rifled barrel continuously spits out death. The violent recoil kicks the massive breech back with incredible force. Smoking empty casings pile up on the ribbed floor with a deafening clang, the hot brass burning legs through thin Kirza boots. The crew methodically forges their exhaustion into pinpoint fire. German career officers refuse to believe their eyes. They are being ruthlessly gunned down at point-blank range. The elite of the Panzer forces is taking unacceptable damage. The enemy frantically searches for the hidden battery, certain they are facing a full-strength battalion of heavy anti-tank guns. A single vehicle is physically incapable of generating such a density of aimed fire. Blind with rage, German gunners begin to hammer away at random. Dozens of long barrels swing toward the rye field. High explosive shells tear up the dry earth in a solid carpet of fire, and steel splinters mow down the grain at the root. The concealed Kliment Voroshilov takes the first direct hits. An enemy armor-piercing round slams into the steep slope of the frontal armor. The 45-ton machine shudders violently. The overheated metal rings deafeningly, but the Ural armor holds firm. A sharp ricochet screams away into the summer sky. A second direct hit strikes the thick cast turret. The shockwave hammers the crew's eardrums, leaving a continuous high-pitched ringing. The inner layer of the armor steel develops a microscopic crack, and fine metal spall sprays through the compartment like a lethal mist. A red-hot splinter gashes the loader's face. Hot, sticky blood soaks his tunic. There is no pain, only the order and the target. "You alive?" "I'm good. Give me the next one." Bloody grime mixes with powder soot. The loader stubbornly reaches for the emptying rack. The shell settles heavily into his bloodied palms. The tank continues to methodically destroy the thrashing column. 75 millimeters of monolithic steel save the crew's lives every second. Outside, a firestorm rages. German shells drum against the invulnerable turret in a frequent hail, each hit resonating inside as a dull concussion. The world has narrowed to the crosshairs of the optic. "Reference point 2. Right 0. Under the turret. Shot!" The gun barks in response. Another German medium tank loses its drive and is shrouded in black smoke. The Germans make a desperate attempt to break the grip. 3 light tanks veer off the road into the bog, trying to bypass the wrecks in a wide arc. Tracks churn the wet earth as engines roar at maximum RPM, but the machines rapidly sink into the impassable mud up to their fenders. They are stationary targets. High explosive! Into the side! Fire! Suddenly, the electric firing pedal sinks into nothingness. The contact is broken. The voltage in the onboard system drops to zero, the circuit severed by the violent internal jarring of the hull. The gun falls silent at the most critical moment. The Germans instantly sense the pause. Dozens of turrets traverse toward the only remaining firing point. The risk of total annihilation rises to the maximum. Manual trigger! Fire by hand! The commander yanks the stiff mechanical lever with inhuman strength. The firing pin strikes the primer. Another shot thunders with primal fury. The barrel continues to spit out metal without stopping. The rhythm of fire becomes even more jagged and brutal. The battle has entered a stage of pure physical madness. Extreme overloads shatter the psyche, but the men inside the red-hot steel box do not break. They monotonously continue the heavy work of destroying the enemy. The battle has raged for 2.5 hours, 150 minutes of continuous fire. The physical limit of endurance was passed long ago. The tankers function solely on raw muscular reflexes. The Ural armor is heating up from direct hits and the merciless July sun. An accidental touch to the inner walls leaves severe burns on bare skin. Blood from gashed faces coats the instrument panels. The heavy breach radiates unbearable heat. The supply of rounds is dwindling. The rack is practically empty. How many? 3 AP, 5 HE. The loader's voice sounds like the dry crackle of tearing canvas, his vocal cords scorched by propellant smoke. Breathing is physically impossible. The crew inhales a suspension of soot, machine oil, and metal spall. Every breath is a cutting pain in torn lungs. The enemy column is deadlocked at the shattered crossing, the bridge destroyed, the way forward blocked by burning hulls. But the surviving enemy is beginning to tighten the noose. Experienced German commanders change tactics. Direct frontal attacks cease. HE bursts plow the rye field on both flanks, and dense suppressive fire pins down the slightest movement. The natural camouflage has been stripped away by shock waves. The heavy tank stands naked amidst black craters. A group of enemy motorcyclists executes a high-speed flanking maneuver, while a reconnaissance patrol stealthily makes its way through a dry stream bed into the Soviet machine's blind spot. A German NCO cautiously rises above the edge of a ravine, his Zeiss binoculars locking on to the soot-stained silhouette. The enemy experiences a severe shock. The commander of the German patrol refuses to believe his eyes. The source of the carnage is a lone vehicle, a single Kliment Voroshilov tank. There is no anti-tank battery, no layered infantry defense. 45 tons of battered steel have single-handedly held off an elite Panzer division for 2.5 hours. This realization shatters German tactical logic. A brief, unnatural pause follows. The German field artillery ceases fire. From behind the smoking wrecks, a half-track slowly edges forward with a large white flag on its antenna. It stops at a safe distance. A powerful megaphone shatters the silence, amplifying distorted, broken Russian. The metallic voice is confident and harsh. Russian tankers, your position is absolutely hopeless. You are completely surrounded. Resistance is futile. Surrender. We firmly guarantee your lives. A heavy silence hangs inside the red-hot fighting compartment. The crew exchanges silent glances. Sweaty faces, caked in soot, show no emotion. The driver grips the useless levers. The gunner does not take his inflamed eyes off the optic. The decision was made long ago. To surrender would mean devaluing every drop of blood spilled. It would be a betrayal of the division that retreated across the river. It would be a violation of their orders. Coordinates, comms hub, right 003, fire. The firing pedal slams into the floor with immense force. The gun lets out a primal roar. The first of the 3 final armor-piercing shells punches through the thin frontal armor of the command vehicle. The half-track disintegrates into burning pieces. This is the crew's definitive answer. Diplomacy is over. Only mutual destruction remains. Load. Fire. A second shot shears the turret off a German medium tank trying to flank from the right. The recoil shakes the hull. The empty casing falls onto the pile of spent brass with a sharp clank. The last one. Load. Fire. The third armor-piercing shell strikes the lead German armored car. A dull explosion. A bright flash. The ammunition is exhausted to the very last round. The 76mm gun falls silent forever, its long barrel slowly drooping. The mission is accomplished. Their comrades are safe. The enemy march has been halted. The price has been paid in full, but the battle is not over. The enemy is driven into a frenzy by the refusal. German sappers are hurled into a final assault, closing in on the stationary tank in short rushes. Gray uniforms flicker between the craters. The DT machine guns join the fray. Right flank! Infantry! Fire! The commander and the radio operator simultaneously mash the triggers. A rain of lead mows down the charging sappers. The drum magazines are emptied in seconds. A dry metallic click. Then an instant swap. Continuous fire again. The internal space fills with the acrid smell of burnt propellant. Hot, spent casings shower into the canvas catch bags. German soldiers fall into the dry grass, cut down by accurate bursts. But there are too many. The sappers crawl into the machine's dead zones. Machine guns are empty! Sidearms ready! The tankers whip out their Tokarev pistols. The commander pulls out a heavy Nagant revolver. The enemy climbs onto the engine compartment, their hobnailed boots stomping loudly on the armor. Submachine gun barrels are shoved through the narrow vision slits. A final, desperate struggle ensues. Shots ring out at point-blank range. Bullets whistle as they ricochet off the internal steel. The crew fights until the last round. The pistol slides lock back, dry and final. A clatter of metal on metal comes from the outside. German sappers hurriedly plant shaped magnetic charges at the base of the turret and on the engine deck. The fuses are lit. The commander slowly lowers his empty revolver and looks at his doomed crew. Black, soot-stained faces, hands beaten bloody. The calm eyes of professionals who have performed their work to perfection. A monstrous double explosion rips the 45-ton machine apart. A firestorm fills the compartment. The assault is over. Resistance is broken. The dead tankers pass into eternity. The scorched wasteland sinks into a ringing silence. Thick black smoke dissipates over the destroyed crossing. Fire finishes off puddles of spilled diesel. A deafening silence sets in, pressing against ruptured eardrums. Elite German units tally the price. The arithmetic is harsh. 11 German tanks burned, 6 heavy armored cars destroyed, 57 dead elite soldiers and officers. The victorious march has choked on its own blood. The schedule for the push east has been destroyed. The massive mechanized column has frozen around a lone pocket of resistance. Twisted metal cools with a quiet crackling. The smell of scorched flesh mixes with the stench of powder smoke. A group of German staff officers approaches the riddled hull of the Soviet tank. Their uniforms are caked in mud and soot. They walk in icy silence, boots crunching over spent brass and shards of armor. The mangled metal bears the traces of a battle incredible in its brutality. The frontal plate is pitted with deep gouges from dozens of direct hits. The turret is covered in soot. A German colonel stops by the wrecked machine, looking long and hard at the perforated Ural armor. He tries to grasp the scale of what occurred. His rational mind refuses to accept the obvious. This entire slaughter was the work of a single crew. No hidden reserves, no camouflaged battery. One combat vehicle against an entire Panzer group. A short, sharp, guttural command rings out. German combat engineers scramble onto the scorching armor, wielding massive steel crowbars. The heavy turret hatch is seized shut, fused by the heat of a powerful internal explosion. The overheated metal grates sickeningly. With a strained screech, the hatch finally yields to brute force and heaves backward. Thick, leaden smoke rises slowly from the soot-stained interior. The officers peer into the wrecked machine, their faces instantly turning to stone, draining of color. It is a moment of absolute, irrational psychological shock. Inside, there are no doomed fanatics shackled in iron chains. Inside the red-hot steel box lie the broken bodies of volunteers. Their soot-blackened, dead faces expressed nothing but icy, professional composure. Dead hands still grip control levers and empty service pistols in a vice-like clutch. They chose this horrific death in a kill zone of their own making, coolly carrying out their dirty work until the very last second. The Wehrmacht colonel slowly removes his service cap. He issues an unprecedented order, one that flagrantly violates every standing army regulation. The enemy crew is to be buried with full military honors. The burial detail silently digs a deep, straight grave at the edge of the dusty dirt road. Local villagers are roughly rounded up from a nearby hamlet under armed escort. The terrified peasants stand in a dense, gray huddle at the edge of the scorched field, waiting for an immediate mass execution. They submissively expect a reprisal for the colossal losses inflicted on the occupation forces. But something entirely different unfolds. The German soldiers carefully and reverently remove the bodies of the fallen tankers from the mangled machine. The charred remains are wrapped in clean canvas shelter halves and slowly lowered to the damp bottom of the mass grave. The enemy forms a straight ceremonial line. The colonel delivers a brief eulogy. His words are dry, born of sincere and profound shock. They are words of the deepest professional admiration for the unyielding courage of the bridge's defenders. He holds these nameless dead enemies up as an example to his own living elite soldiers, publicly acknowledging their absolute moral superiority in this bloody engagement. A sharp drill command barks out. 3 dry rifle volleys tear through the evening silence in perfect synchronization. The rifle salute renders final military honors to the doomed crew. The long barrels of the German Mausers smoke slowly. The Oberleutnant steps back from the edge of the filled grave and pulls out a thick field journal. A hard lead pencil leaves sharp, even lines on the yellowish paper. The dry, pedantic statistics of losses sustained are immediately followed by a heavy philosophical conclusion. He writes of the incomprehensible steel will of the dead Russian enemy, recording the fact that the war in the East is taking on an entirely different form. The old, easy European templates no longer work here. The human factor is shattering perfect German tactical logic. The entry hits the paper like a grim verdict on the entire future of the Eastern campaign. The enemy has been physically annihilated, torn to shreds by shaped charges, but their spirit remains absolutely unbroken. The officer snaps the journal shut with a dull thud. This scribbled notebook becomes the sole documentary evidence of a titanic feat of tank warfare. The German column finally cranks its cooled engines. The surviving tanks slowly and heavily bypass the burning husks of their own machines to resume their interrupted march. Animal fear has taken firm root in their cold, calculating minds. A lone, fresh grave without names remains under the scorching July sun by a nameless river. The bureaucratic mechanism of total oblivion has already been set in motion. The front lines rapidly recede far to the east. The roar of heavy artillery is replaced by the dry, continuous clatter of headquarters typewriters. A completely different war begins. A brutal war of flawless rear-echelon paperwork against living human memory. The cold military bureaucratic machine begins to methodically finish off the dead heroes. This vast system operates with more terror and efficiency than an elite German Panzer division. German armor-piercing shells merely tore human flesh and melted thick Ural steel. Headquarters ink erases the very fact of these men's existence forever. The enormous scale of the 1941 summer retreat breeds total documentary chaos. Divisional personnel rosters burn irrevocably in iron trunks during nighttime breakouts from tightening pockets. Black ebonite 1D tags are lost forever in the thick roadside mud. Communications are severed. There are no direct witnesses. The rescued infantry marches away quickly, vanishing without a trace into the bloody meat grinder of the war's first months. The names of the doomed tank crew plummet rapidly into the bottomless black hole of headquarters statistics. The rear echelon apparatus demands perfect order. The absence of a direct report from immediate command signifies the total absence of the engagement itself. None of their own saw how a lone Soviet heavy tank locked down the river crossing. None of the surviving Soviet commanders can officially confirm the destruction of 11 enemy tanks and 6 heavy armored vehicles. For the spacious, bright offices of the High Command, this brutal fight by the nameless river simply does not exist. The flawless iron logic of military record-keeping requires strict, confirming signatures and round official stamps. There are none. The cardboard folder snaps shut. The dead tankers are instantly relegated to the most terrifying and absolutely hopeless clerical category: missing in action. This short, dry phrase never misses its mark. It robs the fallen professionals of more than just their earned military glory. It cynically robs them of death itself. Dry official forms scatter across the vast country in bulk. Weary mail carriers silently hand gray paper rectangles into the trembling hands of aging parents. The thin, official paper strikes like a backhanded blow. The family of the heavy tank commander receives a standard, brief, printed notification. It contains not a single word of truth regarding the titanic scale of the feat performed. There is no detailed description of the white-hot tank armor or the blistering artillery fire. There is not the slightest mention of the full military honors rendered by a stunned German colonel. The parents will never know the true, bloody price their son coolly extracted from the advancing enemy. The official form confirms only an absolute void. Uncertainty weighs heavily on the mother's shoulders. A man simply walked out of his home and vanished forever into the gray fog of the global slaughter. The state formally closes the thin personnel file and consigns it to a deep, dark archive. Time takes up its own ruthless tool, methodically erasing the physical traces of that colossal exertion of human strength. The first torrential autumn rains drench the scorched earth. The damp soil indifferently swallows deep rifle pits and black shell craters. The heavy 45-ton hulk of the knocked-out Kliment Voroshilov tank does not stand long as a lonely monument to unyielding steel will. Special salvage crews arrive from the deep, safe rear. The war industry constantly demands massive amounts of fresh metal. Rear echelon workers, businesslike, unroll the long rubber hoses of heavy gas cutters. The hissing blue flame of the torch bites easily into the melted Ural armor. The mangled metal, soaked through with the blood and cold sweat of the doomed crew, is ruthlessly cut into transportable chunks. The shapeless scrap is loaded onto open railway flat cars and sent into the white-hot maws of industrial open-hearth furnaces for total smelting. The material evidence of the heroism is destroyed to its very foundation. In the spring, heavy-tracked farm tractors roll out onto the former battlefield. Sharp steel plows turn over the earth, packed tight by explosions, with a loud, metallic crunch. The fertile topsoil is ruthlessly overturned. The sight of the bloody roadside slaughter vanishes without a trace beneath the even furrows of a new field. Tall, golden rye rises once again over the banks of the Dobrost River. Nature silently heals the last terrible scars. The lone mass grave of the tankers becomes overgrown with thick, tall grass. There is no massive granite obelisk here. The villagers quickly return to the heavy, daily grind of collective farm labor. The dull, earth-shaking roar of tank guns is gradually and permanently forgotten. All that remains are vague, entirely unconfirmed local legends. The vast system delivers its final, most precise, and crushing bureaucratic blow. Long after the fact, the truth begins to seep slowly through the thick concrete of historical oblivion. A timid initiative arises to worthily and officially recognize the incredible feat of the commander whose heavy tank halted an enemy armada. An official award citation is prepared for the nation's highest title, Hero of the Soviet Union. It is an absolutely deserved, mathematically proven, and just reward for saving an entire retreating infantry division. But the cold bureaucratic machine instantly finds an insurmountable formal obstacle in its path. There is a strict, unalterable instruction for the proper filing of award documents. To issue an official government decree, a personal pre-war photograph of the nominee is absolutely mandatory. The state needs the photograph to create a proper ideological propaganda portrait for the central newspapers. Headquarters officers make a brief, official inquiry to the man's place of residence. The dry reply arrives with frightening speed. Personal photographs of the tank commander no longer exist. The log house in his home village burned to the ground long ago, along with all the few old family albums. His relatives saved not a single small paper snapshot. The hero's face has been permanently erased from the visual memory of the vast state. The logic of the state system functions with flawless clerical cruelty. No suitable propaganda photo means no official decree for the high honor. Heartless clerical formality defeats spilled hot blood with ease. The title of Hero of the Soviet Union is officially rescinded. Blue Headquarters ink proves far more resilient than 3 inches of monolithic cast steel. The commander, who coolly decimated a German armored column, loses his final battle to a bureaucratic regulation. Documentary void finally triumphs over real historical fact. Decades pass, paving over historical memory with thick concrete. The state machine keeps its dark secrets well. It seems the lone battle at the Dobrost River has been permanently erased from reality. The heavy steamroller of time has nearly finished its destructive work. But the death grip of oblivion suddenly develops a deep crack. German order makes a fatal mistake. The yellowed journal of the dead Oberleutnant is snatched from the muddy void of non-existence. Many years later, the scribbled notebook crosses international borders. Translated pages land on the desks of Soviet journalists. The dry lines of Gothic script strike like a blow. The pedantic enemy describes the roadside catastrophe in exhaustive detail, scrupulously confirming the destruction of 11 tanks by a single Soviet crew. The German document breaches the concrete wall of official silence. A new, grueling war begins. This is a war without artillery fire or tank wedges. It is a prolonged assault on archive shelves. A stubborn village historian begins a desperate investigation, entering into a sharp conflict with a vast, indifferent system. Official offices dully demand round stamps and reports. The investigator methodically pries shards of searing truth from old village legends. He travels on foot to interview the gray-haired witnesses of that terrifying July day in 1941. The old-timers heavily recall the earth-shaking roar and the black smoke over the wrecked crossing. They describe the burial of the dead tankers with full military honors. Their rambling testimonies are precisely recorded on paper, and that paper becomes an armor-piercing shell against cold bureaucratic indifference. The researcher sends hundreds of registered letters to military archives. Bulky envelopes fly into the void. The replies arrive exclusively as standard rejections. Documents are irrevocably lost. Divisional rosters were destroyed during the retreat. There are no official confirmations. The tension of this endless paper battle is physically exhausting. Every official rejection is a blunt punch to the gut. The apparatus methodically crushes any initiative, but the historian categorically refuses to surrender the captured line. He acts exactly like the fallen, cool-headed commander. He confidently loads new sheets of inquiries into his typewriter. He hunts for the slightest clues in the faded reports of neighboring infantry divisions. He obsessively searches for specific names. A human life is spent proving the reality of the bloody slaughter at the nameless bridge. The state machine begins to heavily yield its reinforced concrete positions. The gathered facts become undeniable. The testimonies of the stunned enemy and the local residents fuse into a monolithic picture. Under pressure, the Central Archives finally release sparse, typed lines from recovered award sheets. The names of the doomed crew regain their legal right to exist. The commander, gunner, driver, and loader emerge from the black fog of the missing. But the sluggish system delivers one last spiteful blow. The commander's face is still missing from the personnel files. The department strictly demands visual confirmation for an official portrait. No original photograph means no full restoration of historical memory. The bureaucracy attempts to hold its silent defense. The investigator executes an incredibly complex flanking maneuver. He finds old comrades who miraculously survived. The gray-haired veterans strain their fading, decades-old memories. Piece by piece, they reconstruct the facial features of the fallen commander. A professional artist makes dozens of rough sketches. Line follows line. A broad forehead, a heavy, determined jaw, the stubborn gaze of a professional. The man's face is literally resurrected from the fragments of others' tarnished memories. The restored portrait becomes an act of ultimate justice. The precise drawing finally breaks the resistance of the bureaucracy. Justice punches through the thick concrete of the clerks with a loud crack. The dead tank crew wins this protracted paper battle decisively, decades after their deaths. A modest stone monument rises by the busy highway, a simple gray obelisk near the rebuilt bridge. No unnecessary monumental scale, only names carved in stone and a brief, grim description of the mission accomplished. The heavy labor of historians worthily concludes that very July tank ambush. They took up the baton of a brutal fight and confidently held the assigned objective. The war for the truth has ended in unconditional victory. The steel will of the lone KV crew is cast in eternal stone. Cynical state arithmetic functions with absolute ruthlessness. The propaganda machine demands fast, bright, and easily understood symbols. Rotary printing presses churn out massive runs in the millions around the clock. Fictional poster heroes immediately receive loud fame and massive government awards. Perfect faces look out confidently from the glossy front pages. Real combat professionals are left to bleed out in the cold shadows of history. Their incredibly heavy, dirty, and bloody work categorically fails to fit into beautiful ceremonial reports. Their charred, mutilated bodies are entirely unsuitable for solemn speeches from high, polished podiums. The weary, doomed tankers carried out their brutal final order without a single loud word. They simply blocked the river crossing with a steel hull. They simply and coolly traded their 4 young lives for the tactical salvation of an entire retreating infantry division. This honest, razor-sharp mathematics of war is too inconvenient for rear echelon offices. The vast system always chooses a convenient fiction over the searing, incredibly terrifying truth of trench reality. The sharp, unbearable contrast strikes directly at exposed nerves. Loud official glory goes to other tank brigades and elite guards corps. Their silk banners are heavily laden with glittering medals. Their long historical combat paths are detailed in exhaustive depth in thick academic textbooks. But here stands a modest, lone, almost forgotten obelisk by the quiet Dobrost River. A simple gray concrete stone, short, clipped text, 4 restored surnames. No unnecessary glittering bronze, no pompous granite grandeur. Only the dry military confirmation of a flawlessly executed combat mission. This sharp dissonance physically stuns the viewer. The real war always hides in such remote, nameless places, in deep craters overgrown with earth, in the jagged, rusted shards of pierced tank armor that have sunk deep into the damp clay forever. A real tactical victory is forged in absolute, total solitude, when the soldiers have not a single, minimal chance of physical survival. The bitter paradox of world history finally and irrevocably shatters the usual, comfortable worldview. The stunned, merciless enemy preserved the smallest details of this brutal fight far more carefully than the men's own vast motherland. The elite German Panzer division remembered this bloody July day of 1941 forever, on a genetic level. The German staff officers scrupulously and accurately recorded every burned machine and every killed career soldier. The pedantic adversary reliably documented the incredible will displayed by the doomed Soviet crew. Enemy field archives confidently guarded this grim, harsh truth from the destructive influence of the relentless decades. The native rear echelon bureaucracy simply and mechanically struck the dead men from every existing roster. The native state system coolly erased the very fact of the titanic feat for the sake of the proper protocol filing of cardboard forms. This proven historical fact hits the mind harder than any large-caliber armor-piercing shell. It leaves a deep, invisible wound in the very concept of justice. But a human life, voluntarily and consciously given for specific, exhausted infantrymen, forever outweighs any dusty headquarters archives. The surrounded tankers gave no thought to future historical memory. They uttered no ringing patriotic oaths before slamming the heavy steel turret hatches shut. They were solving a specific, complex engineering and fire mission with clinical precision. Hold the narrow bridge at all costs, completely destroy the breakthrough armored column, reliably ensure the withdrawal of their exhausted comrades. This grim, icy, masculine automatism transforms a brief and incredibly brutal fight into absolute, unconditional immortality. The Kliment Voroshilov heavy tank was the first to expend its design life by 100%. The mechanics of the silent ambush worked flawlessly. The lethal enemy march was stopped dead. The crew confidently stepped far beyond the limits of human physical capability. Simple men defeated the elite motorized armada of European conquerors. Professionals confidently defeated cold state indifference. The dead heroes finally defeated time itself. Today, the Dobrost River carries its calm, dark waters exactly as it did in that distant, hot summer. The wooden planking rotted away and crumbled to dust long ago. A new, modern asphalt highway bypasses this place. The noise of passing heavy trucks barely reaches here. An ear-splitting silence reigns. This heavy, natural silence is saturated with incredible respect for the dead professionals. The wind rustles dryly in the tall stalks of field grass, as if repeating the short, clipped commands of the gun commander. Sunlight glints off the calm surface of the water. Nature reliably guards what the indifferent state clerks tried to ruthlessly erase. The earth forever remembers the incredible weight of 45 tons of Ural steel and the searing temperature of spilled tank blood. This place possesses a monstrous gravity of heroism. It forces any traveler who stops to silently bow their head. It forces one to grit their teeth from a deep understanding of the true, terrifying price of any battle won. No pathos, only dry earth and absolute eternity. Armor pierced, crew destroyed, mission accomplished.